So the title probably says it all. In this one, we are finally back to the point where you can build today a gaming PC that will cost you roughly $500. I want to go over a potential parts list for anybody that's looking for an actual list of things to purchase so that you can get up and running for about $500 and actually playing video games. But also I want to talk about a cheap way, actually an even cheaper way of building a system than the one with the parts list I'm going to go over, a way to cut down costs just a little bit, as well as probably raise your frame rate quite a bit as well in the process. But as always, you have to be willing to use the used market to do that. But as we get into this, as always, links will be in the description down below to the PC part picker list, as well as to Amazon links for a lot of the components I'm talking about. Also, as always, pricing and availability are always changing, so those links are a great place to check up on that. And for a build like this, if you notice the parts cost more than they did when I recorded this, you can always look for substitute parts. For example, if the motherboard is a little bit more expensive now than when I record the video, hey, go and look for a similar motherboard that will still be compatible with the CPU. With all those disclaimers and items out of the way, let's look at this parts list because it should be a solid little gaming rig. Now, recently Gamers Nexus took a look at the CPU, not exactly this one. They were looking at the 10100 and 10100F, but the 10105F is a really good way to get into gaming on the cheap. It has a nice upgrade path. It's not an overly old architecture, so, getting a top-end CPU from that generation will give you really excellent gaming performance, but as a way to just get up and running, this is a really good way to spend less than $100 and still get a capable gaming CPU. Now, if you do need more horsepower, of course, you can adjust this build list accordingly. For instance, if you need more than 4 cores, you can always go with something like a 6-core CPU. And by the way, something like a 10400F, which would be just a drop in replacement for the 10105F, that's 6 cores, 12 threads, and it's going to run you about $120 or $125 or so. So even going to a 6-core CPU is not going to cost you a ton of money. Now, for your motherboard, don't spend big here. Get a cheap motherboard that's going to do the trick for you. I picked out the Gigabyte B560M DS3H. Gigabyte's super cheap. Options here have been good for a long time, the sort of DS3H lineup. This particular motherboard can be found for as low as $60 right now, but of course, if you can't find one for $60, find a similar motherboard. Although I will say at that price, a lot of the time you're going to be looking at motherboards that only have 2 DIMM slots, whereas the DS3H actually has 4 DIMM slots. So if you end up with a motherboard that only has 2 DIMMs, you'll probably want to go ahead and get the maximum amount of RAM you will ever want from the get-go, so you don't have to worry about swapping out RAM and trying to sell old RAM and replace it with higher capacity RAM. The DS3H is nice because it gives you the capability to start with 16 gigabytes, and if you ever need more, you can always add 2 more sticks of RAM to double that capacity. RAM here, I picked out basically the cheapest kit I could find. It just so happens to be a Silicon Power 16 gigabyte kit. DDR4 3200, though I believe you're only going to be able to run it at 2666 megahertz, but still a really good value. And if you ever have a motherboard upgrade that sort of allows you to run faster memory, hey, then you already have the faster RAM to run. For storage, I go with the generic commodity class NVMe drive, 1 terabyte here to give you plenty of storage for some games. And then, of course, because it's a PC and upgrading is easy, you can always drop in more SATA storage down the line if you need more capacity. Now I'm going to skip the GPU for the moment and move on to the case. I have the Moravol Micro ATX mesh case. Let me get you a picture of that because it's actually quite a nice case for the price. So here's what I actually like about this case. It has really good airflow. It comes with a pair of RGB fans that you can, just have going. But more importantly, it has a lot of room to work in. It has a nice power supply basement. I've worked with a similar case with basically the same layout, just different front panels and things. And this is a fairly good case for especially a beginning PC builder to get working with a micro ATX chassis. It's not going to take up a ton of space, and the price right now at least looks like it's pretty solid. So check the current price. If it's more than about $70 or $75, you might want to look for something else like a Fractal Design Focus G or something like that. Basically, look for a case that's not overly expensive, one that has good airflow and has plenty of space for a GPU, and it's going to be good to go for a while. For power supplies, you know, if you've watched this channel for a long time, I've recommended EVGA's B-Stock power supplies. A lot of times on Wednesdays, you can pick them up for around $30 for a 600 watt power supply. But if you can't find one on EVGA's B-Stock website, or if you can't find anything comparable and cheaper, then you can always go out and pay around $45-ish right now would be the going rate for a power supply that's going to be able to power this system no problem, and also power several upgrades down the line. Now let's talk about that GPU. Right now, the only GPU on the market that's brand new, that's going to get you the warranty safeguards that you may want, especially if you're a first-time builder, and keep you around the $500 mark for the budget. And I know we're a little bit over it at $537, but of course, I'm going to give you a way of saving a little bit of money here in a second. But the only GPU that's going to keep us close to $500 right now is the RX 6400, which seems to be a really solid option if you're looking to be gaming at 1080p. It's going to be able to play all of your older titles up until quite new titles. Now, some very new titles that are very demanding may push the 6400 to the point where you're having to drop down the settings quite a bit. The way around that, if you're gaming at 1080p and you're willing to look at the used market, is to go and look at the RX 580 8GB card, because you know, with the mining crash and crypto crash, yeah, they're getting quite cheap again. So over on eBay, at least in the United States, in my local market, you're going to be able to find RX 580 8GB cards for right around that $150 price, pretty much whenever you want, at least at the moment here in late June 2022. And the reason for it is really simple. People are unloading cards. So one of these listings here, there's a bunch of MSI cards. It looks like 15 have already sold. There's still 6 available, meaning this seller was selling 21 of this exact card, and you can even make them an offer. I bet you can save a little bit of money off that $150 price, especially if you're somebody looking to sort of wheel and deal a little bit. You could always purchase a couple of these, offer them maybe instead of $150 for one, give them something like $250 for two. If they bite on that, then you can always turn around and possibly sell that second card to somebody, especially if you know somebody else that wants to build a PC alongside you for a similar price. This could be a good way of saving some money by putting out offers that you'll buy multiple cards for a lower per item cost. So instead of $150, maybe ask for $120 or $125. Regardless, the used market right now is a really good way to save some money. The downside, of course, a lot of these GPUs are coming off of mining rigs, so they may have been heavily used, they might not have been that heavily used, they may have been in excellent condition and the environment generally good, or they may have been in chassis where dust built up and they're filthy. They're kind of a bit of a Wild West approach, so sort of buyer beware, because you may get a cheaper card now, but you also might have to replace it much sooner. So bringing it all back together, this build, if you're buying the brand new build with the RX 6400, is going to right now run you about $537, but you can save a little money on the power supply if you pick up a cheaper one from EVGA B-Stock, which those do come with a warranty, by the way, and you can also shave off a little bit of money if you go with something like an RX 580 8GB. You could actually get the price down probably right at that $500 price. But if you want the brand new thing and you're happy with the performance of an RX 6400, great. But the big deal here is $500 gaming PCs are actually back to the point where they're reasonable. You can get solid performance, upgradability, and you can actually put one together pretty much whenever you want. So it's been a long couple of years with silicon shortages and super inflated prices, but we're back to the point where you can build a budget system, and that is really awesome for people looking to get into PC gaming. So as we move forward here, if you would like me to take a look at the RX 6400, maybe build a system around one, then let me know in those comments down below, because it is a card I'm legitimately interested in, especially the low profile versions. Putting one of those in like one of those small form factor Dell Optiplexes could be fun. So if that is something you're super interested in, let me know in those comments down below. Otherwise, also let me know what you think of its parts list, and for those of you out there that have built a PC recently, what kind of deals did you find out on the market? With all that said, like, share, comment, all those things super helpful. Let YouTube queue up a couple more videos from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I will see you guys in the next video.